Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Last week, we broke down the NFC, all the free agent moves, gave everybody a grade, and picked the winner of free agency from the NFC. This week, we're doing something similar, but in the AFC. Before we dive into that, though, major news out of the NFC. Aaron Donald from the Rams retired, which kind of throws a hamper into everything we were discussing last week about the Rams. RC, before we kick things off in the AFC, any other comments you want to relay about the NFC winners since our podcast and any updates from FF metrics?
The only two things I thought NFC wise that has changed since the last show, I mean, the Aaron Donald thing, but we also stated that it was a battle between potentially the Lions and the Rams for supremacy in the NFC by the moves that they were making. And I said I would determine, for me, that was for me, Rams, Lions, but that I was waiting to see which one of them was going to sign a legitimate backup before I got too crazy betting on, especially the Rams, because the Rams have better odds, more juicy odds to bet. I've slowly started to bet the Rams to win the West, to win the NFC, to win the Super Bowl, but more juice on just winning the division. But I was waiting for one of those two teams to get serious about their backup quarterback, and then at the same time the Aaron Donald news hit, and I was like, oh man, that's a blow to the Rams' momentum. But then they signed Jimmy Garoppolo like an hour later and perked up my spirits about the Rams. That Garoppolo move is huge. That's the perfect move. That's the type of move that the Lions should have made. They cannot go in. They cannot, to me, they can't be serious about going through this season and having unproven Hendon Hooker as the backup when they're so close to being able to win a Super Bowl, where we know Jimmy Garoppolo could possibly carry that team if he needed to, even if it was, Stafford got hurt at halftime of the NFC title game, we would feel comfortable with Garoppolo jumping in there. So I'm down that Aaron Donald is gone, but I'm up that they got Jimmy Garoppolo. So that, and just looking back, I was talking to somebody about the Washington Commanders moves. I don't want to say that they're having a good off season, but just noticing how Philadelphia is starting to fall. And I'm not down on Dallas because they haven't made any moves. That's actually, a good thing. But Dallas was fading last year. The Giants have fallen off to oblivion. Washington, by virtue of just kind of backfilling in some of their holes with some decent players, if they get Jaden Daniels, it's an interesting team that may not be great, but everything else in the division is falling past them. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on the moves Washington's going to make from here on in. So those are the two things that struck me about the NFC since we last talked.
And RC, just to clear things up for the listeners too, by no means are you saying Jimmy Garoppolo is a top 10 quarterback, but you're just saying that if there's a situation where he needs to come into the NFC Championship game, similar to what Chad Henne has done for the Chiefs, Garoppolo certainly has the capabilities to give you a quarter, a half, maybe a game or two, whereas someone like Hendon Hooker could be catastrophic and cost them the game.
And I'm saying that from a better standpoint as a profiteer. If I'm going to start betting on anything to do with the Lions or the Rams, to be up over the top of the 49ers, because I think that's where the profit potential is sitting right now. I like Atlanta, like everybody likes Atlanta, but they're the favorites in their division. They're at negative I. I mean, I don't see a ton of profit available in betting the Falcons. And then if something happens to Cousins, then what? So having Garoppolo, if something goes wrong, even for a game, or maybe it's for a half of a season, at least I've got a puncher's chance going forward, if a crisis hits with Stafford going down, that's my great fear in betting any of these. Is last year, what was the team that we all put the most money on positively in 2023? We made a bunch of money negatively betting against Bryce Young in Carolina, but who did we all put the most money on in the preseason? It was the Cincinnati Bengals to go to the Super Bowl, to win the Super Bowl, because the odds were there, and we all thought last year that the Bengals were that team. Then Burrow went down, and you see what happened. So as a bettor, I want to have some insurance at quarterback. I can deal with everything else, but not the drop off of Stafford to Carson Wentz or the drop off of Stafford to Stetson Bennett. So I feel better. I feel a little bit better about the Rams situation as a bettor. But I'm interested to see how this AFC is going to turn out, because again, last week we were looking at it. I'm really looking at the collective group of who's in and who's out, kind of for the first time, going through every single team and really ruminating on it. I've been working on the fantasy aspect and the projections aspect, but now we're kind of looking back at it and making some judgment calls of just who feels like they're making the move and who feels like they're regressing.
Yeah, and similar
as a team.
And similar to last week, RC, we'll start off by going division by division, previewing all 4 teams, and then selecting a winner by the division. We'll pair them up with each other at the end, and then choose a winner for the AFC, and then maybe we'll do an AFC versus NFC at the end. So let's kick things off with the AFC West. Last place team in 2023 were the Los Angeles Chargers. Obviously, Herbert got injured in the middle of last season, which kind of derailed their season. Their coach got fired, and in comes Jim Harbaugh, making his return to the NFL after a decade-long absence. During free agency, RC, they gutted their entire offense. Eckler, gone. Mike Williams, gone. Keenan Allen, traded. But they did make some moves, getting Denzel Perryman, their old linebacker, back in to the defense. They also signed running back Gus Edwards from Baltimore. So, and the GM today went as far as to say that he's going to be the bell cow back. RC, it seems like their offense needs a lot of work here. What are you seeing? What did you like? What didn't you like about the Chargers' moves thus far in free agency?
I don't like it in general. This felt like a team that was. This situation feels like the Chargers. Somebody could have taken over the Chargers and went, we just need to make a couple tweaks here. We're close, but we need to do A, B, or C. I think what Harbaugh's doing is he's coming in and going, these aren't my guys. I'm going to gut this thing, and I'm going to rebuild it in my image, and this might take 3 years to get done. They are not any better at running back with Gus Edwards versus Austin Eckler. That's a downgrade. Losing Keenan Allen is telling me they're not really playing for this season. If they really thought they could go forward with this team, if they could just add a couple pieces, you definitely keep Keenan Allen and you try to make a run for it. But I believe that Harbaugh is going to come in there like most new coaches do, and he's obviously got a ton of cachet. He's going to strip them of all of their past players that are not beholden to him, that are not his picks, and he's going to rebuild it back with quote-unquote his guys. And I'm not impressed with what I see. I mean, Hayden Hurst, Gerald Everett out, he stinks. Hayden Hurst in, that's not a big upgrade. Denzel Perryman was good a couple of years ago. And Kenneth Murray is gone. Signing Will Dissly at tight. It just they're putting together a run game offense when they're sitting there with a Maserati at quarterback. They're they've got this Maserati and they're going to put a cheap stereo system in it, and they're going to put cheap upholstery and cheap tires and try to go forward by not
I want to add,
building around Justin Herbert.
RC, another way to think about it is they're living in a crappy apartment, but they have a Ferrari parked outside. They have a nice QB, but it makes me wonder at 5, and Harbaugh wants his guys. Do you think that Herbert's available and that they would actually consider drafting JJ McCarthy, or do you think Harbaugh's full of it when he props up McCarthy?
I think he believes that McCarthy is great because he helped them win a national championship the way that Harbaugh wants to win, not with the quarterback, for the quarterback to do exactly what the coach says. I don't think he'll pick McCarthy over Justin Herbert. If he wanted to add McCarthy and then later trade Herbert like a year from now, he would have kept his mouth shut and McCarthy would have been a 3rd round available in the 3rd round. Instead, he shoots his mouth off, so he just ensured that he's not going to be able to steal McCarthy. So that's kind of a tip of the cap to McCarthy. It's going to get him well paid, because every scout, every analyst was not thinking that McCarthy was a 1st round player. He was more of a 3rd round. Harbaugh says one thing, and now all of a sudden he's going to be like a top 10 pick. It's a joke. Everything's emotion. There is no science to it in the NFL. I read an article today in The Athletic about scouts talking about how they judge players by their butt size, and I was just like, this is crazy town. So what I see, I think Harbaugh's going to turn the Chargers around, and they're going to be a good team eventually, but doesn't look like he's banking on that happening this year. They have the 3rd most payroll available. They have the 3rd most salary cap now. They could have traded all of these players before. They could have dumped all this payroll before and then bought players, but they didn't do that, which to me is just another sign is they don't care about this season. Harbaugh just cares about building his culture, like every coach, building his culture and getting in his guys and all that. And I'm sure it's going to work. I mean, it worked at Michigan. It just took 10 years. So 10 plus years. Hopefully he's got that long with the Chargers, but it ain't going to be 2024. So this team is not better. It is worse. I think he's going to trade the number 5 pick to get more picks because he's not playing for now. And I don't think he wants to play with high pick type of players. He wants to get a bunch of grinders, which is totally fine. I totally am down with him doing what he wants to do, but it's gonna hurt 2024, and I think it's gonna hurt Justin Herbert for fantasy football.
Yeah, definitely.
Unless he has the draft of a lifetime. But even if he has the draft of a lifetime and brings in Roman Wilson, and if he gets Neighbors at 5, and I just don't think that's what he's gonna do. I think he's going to surround himself with run game stuff. He's going to get more picks and pick more of his guys. But you'll see if they make 8 or 9 draft picks this year, I'll bet 80% of them plus are going to come from the Big Ten, either from his team or guys he's seen in the conference, which makes sense. But I mean that's usually how that goes. So I see the Chargers as taking a step back.
Yeah,
and Justin Herbert it's a wasted year.
And one of those guys is Blake Corum, RC. I think a lot of people have been tying the running back from Michigan to the Chargers. Could be Gus's backup and eventually taking over the job. But with what they've done to their team, gutting it, I think they have no choice but to consider trading back, especially since you have Minnesota sitting there with 2 first-round picks. Might as well move back to 11. Grab a receiver or tackle there and just keep cover the holes that that they sort of caused during the offseason. So I think that's probably what they're going to do.
Their first signing, I think, of the free agency was Will Dissly, and he's one of the best run blocking tight ends when he's healthy. That was their first move. Well, their first move before that was hiring Greg Roman, almost ensuring that they're going to be a run-based team. Then they get Will Dissly at tight end. Then they get Hayden Hurst as another bigger blocking tight end. They let Gerald Everett go, who wasn't a blocking tight end. Then they brought in Gus Edwards. When your big signing is Gus Edwards, and then you run around proclaiming that he's your bell cow,
might be good for fantasy.
I don't have a lot of faith in the Chargers. It's good, yeah, good for fantasy. I'm kind of stunned that they would even come out and say that, because why say that? I mean, unless they're trying to throw everybody off the scent that, to draft the play quorum lower. But just in general, this team is, I don't want to say tanking 2024, but they're not going forward. Not with this group. They got a ton of money and don't really have anybody to show for it.
Lying season is in full effect, RC. Let's move on to the next team. The Raiders finished third in the AFC West last year, and their big signing this year, actually, they might have finished second, but we'll just start with them. I'm not sure if Denver finished third or...
they finished second because they almost snuck into the playoffs at the end.
That's right. But I'll just continue with my train of thought. Sorry, Raiders fans. Their big signing this offseason, RC, was Christian Wilkins, 4 years, $110 million. Now that defensive line not only has Max Crosby, who's one of the best rushers in the league, now you have Christian Wilkins, who's one of the best D tackles. They have a young up-and-coming guy, Kuntz, on the defense, which is good too. They signed Gardner Minshew, but I don't know how great he's going to be for that offense. It's probably going to have similar level quarterback play compared to what they were getting out of O'Connell and Garoppolo last year. They lost Josh Jacobs, their longtime running back. So they definitely look like they're going to go for a QB in the draft, but I don't know how much better they are compared to last year.
They had a bad thing happen to them at the end of last year, and that's that the team got on a little bit of a hot streak. Some luck, some just momentum, some thank God Josh McDaniels isn't here. A lot of rah-rah from Antonio Pierce. And then that got him hired, and he's not ready to be an NFL head coach. He's another Mike Tomlin in this era that with their available money, you can almost go down the line and look at people's free agency and go, oh, that's a head coach who comes from the offensive side of the ball because they're signing offensive players. Oh, this is a defensive guru or defensive coordinator in his past. That's what this team is signing. So it's to no surprise to me that with the money that they had to spend, they gave a ton of money to Christian Wilkins and basically, to me, wasted money on Gardner Minshew. You are not going to take down the Kansas City Chiefs with Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell in 2024. So they must have not been able to either make a trade up for Jaden Daniel, or they just think, like most ex-defensive coordinator type head coaches, that they're going to build a defense and have their heavy run game, and that's the way that they're going to win. So I'm not impressed with, Alexander Mattson, you got to be kidding me. As a signing, Harrison Bryant, again, you can almost go down and through and go, all right, who's the head coaches that are going to go run game and defense? They're the ones that signed the big blocking tight ends, the good blocking tight ends, and Las Vegas signed Harrison Bryant to be the number 2 tight end. That's just a sign that that's where they're going. The offensive-minded teams, they sign a second tight end. It's more of a weaponized tight end. So I don't like anything that they've done. Gardner Minshew is not an answer to keep up in the AFC West. Christian Wilkins is nice, but that's not going to change the entire defense. It's not going to take them to another level. That was a great defense at the end of last year, and I think they think they're going to keep that up, but I don't think they have the horses to be I think they just had a lot of momentum and got hot, and it was nice and it was fun, and now the party's going to be over.
Christian Wilkins could probably win you a game versus KC randomly in September or October, but he's not going to really take you far in the playoffs or even put you in serious contention for that division.
It's nice. It's nice to have, but
yeah.
I wouldn't want to allocate that much money to a defensive tackle.
I think since they lost out on Cliff Kingsbury, I've pretty much hated all their moves. Getting Luke Getsy in there, that's probably not going to end well. It just looks like a bleak outlook for the Raiders.
And I think that's one of the reasons why Kingsbury decided to turn and walk away from them is he would have to play the run game and defense thing, and that's not what he wants to do.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't a contract thing, but more of an organizational decision that they're not going to trade up and go get a QB. So he kind of saw the writing on the wall and wisely decided to. Yeah. I don't want to say wise moves going to the Commanders, but at least they have a shot at getting a QB this year, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know that if Caleb Williams is going first, then you know that they're going to take a quarterback second, whoever it is, and he must agree with that or must be good with whoever their choice, you know, if they're down to 2 or 3 choices, he's fine with that. If you're an offensive coordinator, you want to align yourself with something you can be in control of and have a quarterback that you can see taking you forward. I'm sure Kingsbury looked at the Raiders situation and go, they're building a run game and a defense, and they're going to want me to head up this run game with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. I don't think so.
Yep. So, RC, this next team, the Broncos, and apologies to Raiders fan for calling them third. He finished second, but now we'll move to the Broncos, who finished third in the AFC. RC, they have a long list this offseason. I think the one that garnered the most headlines was letting Russell Wilson go, which created a dead cap hit of over, I think, like $85 million, which can be cut up between this year and next year. They're paying Russell Wilson's salary this year, and the Steelers pretty much signed Wilson for only $1 million, while the Broncos are paying the difference between $39 million and the Vetman, which is just wild. But also, the Broncos made some other moves. They traded away Jerry Jeudy to the Browns for a couple late day 3 picks, and they lost Lloyd Cushenberry from their offensive line to the Titans. They have Justin Simmons sitting out there in free agency. They lost Josie Jewell to the Panthers, and the only notable thing that they've done getting a player-wise is Brandon Jones from Miami, signing him to a 3-year, $20 million deal. RC, how do you feel about the Broncos?
They have cap space, and they've done really nothing with it. Putting money into a safety is besides putting it into an expensive edge rusher, is about the worst thing you could do with money, in my book. They gave a big boost to their kicker, so they're invested in kicker and safety. They still got a ton. They don't have a ton of money, but they have money out there to go sign players with. I don't see them signing anybody. This feels like what Harbaugh is able to do in Los Angeles: walk in there, get a bunch of money, put his own GM in the place, tear the thing down, and start to rebuild it in his image. I think that's what Sean Payton wanted to do. Now this is the year he's getting to do it. It wasn't last year because they were still stuck with Russell Wilson, and he was going to try to make it go with Russell Wilson last year. Didn't work. Now he's going to get his way, and he's going to tear it down. And he's signing a bunch of, it's typical, he's signing a bunch of guys that used to play on the Saints, and then put a bunch of money, including the kicker, and then put a bunch of money into a safety. I don't get how this makes Denver any better. And then at quarterback, what are they going to do at quarterback? If they start Jarrett Stidham, they've got a bottom 10 quarterback in the NFL that's going to start with all kinds of little issues all across the defense and the offense. I mean, credit, they got rid of Jerry Jeudy. but I think they wanted to do that last year and couldn't find a sucker for it, I guess. It just seems to me that Denver's spinning their wheels and is in kind of a rebuild mode. I don't know what they're holding their money for unless they think somebody's going to come spitting out of the system later in the year that they're going to pounce on. But it doesn't seem like their free agents are flocking for 2 years in a row now, that they're not flocking to go play with Sean Payton.
And I didn't study this in great detail, but if they're sitting out there with cap space, they actually did have the option to take Russell Wilson's $85 million cap hit all this year. If this year's a tank year, you're not going to sign anyone or do anything with that cap space. Might as well try to suck up most of it this year, call it an official tank year, get the money off the books, go for next year. So I didn't understand why they wanted to sort of do that, but I understand that $85 million against your cap is a huge number.
Yeah. They're sitting 14th most cap space available right now, 20 million. And maybe they're going to add something, and maybe they can get Penix in the draft. I mean, there's hope. Denver's not dead, but it doesn't look like they're doing anything for 2 years in a row. It doesn't look like Sean Payton's doing anything besides signing guys that used to play with the Saints. I mean, he may be saving his payroll to try to acquire Taysom Hill, which would not surprise me at all. So the three teams that we've looked at, Chargers, Vegas, and Denver, all to me look like they're going backwards from where they were last year. So there's no way any of these teams are going to take down the Chiefs unless Mahomes goes down. And then probably not even then. So players want to go play for Sean McVay. They want to go to San Francisco. They want to go to Miami. They're wanting to go to Houston. They don't seem to want to go to Denver with Sean Payton 2 years in a row. It's weird.
If Mahomes goes down, this might be the worst division in football.
Yeah. It was so bad that Kansas City could still win it.
Yeah. With Blaine, I believe Blaine Gabbert's their backup.
Blaine Gabbert's the backup. I predict that they're going to be the ones that add Zach Wilson as a developmental quarterback once the Jets cut him. But I think they could probably win it with
Let's move right into them, RC. The back-to-back defending Super Bowl champions going for a three-peat, Kansas City Chiefs. Just seems like by default they win. They retained Chris Jones, which is great. They signed Hollywood Brown, who is better than any other receiver not named Rashee Rice that they had on their roster. I mean, Brown certainly has his issues. I won't call him a wide receiver one, but again, I'd rather have him over MVS. I'd rather have him over Richie James, Sky Moore, etc.
I'd rather have COVID than any of those guys.
RC took it there. But the only other thing that's sort of outstanding for me is whether or not they can keep L'Jarius Sneed. If they keep him, I feel like this is almost a home run off season for them. Just being able to have Chris Jones and Sneed and keeping that defense intact. Now they lost Willie Gay, I believe, to the Saints, and they lost Nick Algoretti to the Commanders, who was a rotational lineman for them, and Donovan Smith sitting out there in free agency, but he wasn't all that great. So I think those are holes that they can definitely plug through the remainder of free agency and draft, especially a strong tackle draft. RC, any reason not to give KC the nod as the winner in free agency?
No, their existing defense could carry them to the division title without Mahomes. And it's a place where people want to go play. So if a crisis hits, they'll be ones that can take advantage. Right now in free agency, what has happened in free agency and trades is all of the teams who aren't very good. I mean, typically I'm generalizing, but the teams that aren't very good and are in bad geographies and can't get anybody to willingly come play for them under normal circumstances, they're having to overtrade or overpay to get those guys in. The Chiefs can just sit back and pick off guys that they've done a great job, especially last year when they got like Drew Tranquil and Mike Edwards for nothing. Everybody overlooked them. they'll get 2 or 3 guys that were overlooked. Then they'll get some veteran that gets cut for cap reasons or whatever after June 1st or maybe in August, and they'll come to them on a 1-year deal and take a bit of a discount because they know they can win a Super Bowl. So the Chiefs' best opportunity is probably lies ahead. It doesn't really matter what they've done up to this point. Marquise Brown is certainly an upgrade, but it's not anything. It doesn't blow me away, but I mean, if they can win a Super Bowl with that wide receiver group from last year, then having Marquise Brown certainly isn't going to hurt anything. But this is a case. Their defense is so good, is so young and so deep and so good, and then you got Mahomes. That's all you need to know. If they get Snead back, and I assume that they will, just like they did the same thing with Chris Jones last year. So they'll bring Snead back, and then they'll march on to the number 1 seed unless something happens to Mahomes.
Yeah, and we're not even factoring in their young players taking even another step. Rashee Rice could get better. Pacheco could go to a different level. So we're leaving all that out. All things equal, they should have a pretty clear path to the division title. Let's shift gears. Let's go to the AFC South RC, where the Titans finished last. They have their franchise guy, Will Levis, despite all the rumblings where people think that Tannehill or Rudolph might be starting. I think that's all BS. Levis is clearly the guy there. The moves that they made this free agency, they handed Calvin Ridley, pretty 29-year-old wide receiver, 4 years, $92 million. Didn't really understand that signing, but now you have him with D-Hop and Treylon Burks. So I'm liking their receiver group there. They got Lloyd Cushenberry from Denver, which we just talked about. They signed Awuzie from Cincinnati, a cornerback that was having a decent season a couple seasons ago. I'm not sure where he ended up last year. They got Pollard, but lost Derrick Henry. So I want to see them, RC. They let go of Dillard, their left tackle, I believe, earlier in free agency. They're destined to take Joe Alt, or the best available tackle, at 7 overall in the draft. But I need to see more. They let Will Levis down last year. They nearly killed him in that game in Houston. So they need to do more to adjust their line. I'm not sure that they've done enough for me to feel comfortable with Levis back there this year.
This is, you can see by who they signed what type of head coach they have. They put all their money into wide receiver, center, running back, let go of Derrick Henry. So they're starting to put weapons around Will Levis, but Calvin Ridley's a stretch unless they're going to trade DeAndre Hopkins and let Ridley be kind of the veteran and draft a wide receiver, take a wide receiver in this draft, or maybe they trade Treylon Burks. So yeah, great. They're adding names weapons wise, but the offensive line was the worst in the league, and they lost a center and signed a center. They have legitimately done absolutely nothing to the biggest problem that they had. So they can, even if they get a offensive lineman at 7, that's still not enough from what I've seen. So I'm disappointed by what I'm seeing that they've done. I think there's a real opportunity here to build around Will Levis. Tennessee's acting like I would expect the Chargers or Denver to act. Like, Tennessee looks like, hey man, we're gonna go win this division. We're gonna get money into a wide receiver. We're gonna sign a Awuzie, who he would have known from his Callahan, would have known from his Bengals days. So they're signing Pollard, they're signing names, they're signing things, but without an offensive line, man, this is I don't see how they're going to get over the top of teams like Houston and Indianapolis that are going to be the breakaway successes of the division. So they're doing stuff. I just don't think it was the right stuff.
I just don't get it, RC. Time and time again, teams neglect the offensive line. You got to build your roster inside out. You got to put capital into the O-line. And there were certainly opportunities to do that this offseason. Look at what the Jets did, getting Moses and Tyron Smith, and we'll get to them. Look at what, Jonah Jackson could have been had easily for the Titans. But instead, they just signed Lloyd Cushenberry from the Broncos. Instead of giving Ridley 4 years, $92 million, go get some tackles, go get some guards. Like what?
I like Cushenberry, but they had an okay center before that they let go in free agency that Miami snatched up. So maybe they've upgraded slightly at center. I think this anti-Will Levis sentiment, if you're trying to sign, it's the opposite of what's happening in Houston. Everybody sees C.J. Stroud and they're like, that's the future. We'll sign with Houston. They look at Tennessee and they're like, well, Will Levis is terrible because that's what the media says. So they may have been making plays for offensive linemen who are just like, no, I want to go play for other legitimate team. I want to try to win a title. I don't want to go to die in Tennessee with this terrible Will Levis. So, which I think is a huge mistake that they've made and a wasted opportunity.
Yeah, but let's move on to the next team, RC, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who lost Calvin Ridley to their division rivals. Probably not the worst move in the world not to give him 4 years, $90 million.
They were trying to win that battle.
Yeah, and I think they kind of played chicken with themselves, because if they re-signed Calvin Ridley before a certain time period, they had to give Atlanta a second-round pick. They waited too long and lost him. I think at the end of the day, they might be happy that they didn't pay a 29-year-old that much money, but that's just me.
To get into their mindset, it's like I want to see a team that goes, I am no way, shape, or form paying Calvin Ridley that money. That's ridiculous. Instead, they were in it to the last second, and Ridley wanted to go back there, but he ended up taking the biggest deal possible because that's who he is. So the Jacksonville mindset is already flawed by wanting to chase Calvin Ridley in free agency, but then it's even double flawed when they go, well, now I got a brilliant plan to fill in the gap. We'll sign Gabe Davis, who's maybe the only wide receiver who's worse than Calvin Ridley. So they plow a bunch of money into him. They plow a bunch of money into Eric Armstead at the wrong time. They let Darius Williams go, may have been the best defensive player. Just let him go to the Rams. I just do not understand what Jacksonville is doing. They're a poorly run franchise because of ownership. That's why they're perpetually in last place and getting number one picks in the past. Trevor Lawrence is not an elite quarterback that's going to take them to the promised land. This team is another team that's, I'll say, spinning its wheels, but it's spinning its wheels, and also while it's doing donuts in the mud, spinning its wheels, it's also throwing $1,000 bills out the window while they're doing it. They spent a ton of money, didn't really get any better. Trevor Lawrence, I will keep saying it, like I said last year, he's the fourth best quarterback in this division, which means they're never going to win this division ever again for the next decade unless they do something heroic in the off seasons to build this team, and from what I see, that didn't happen. So
they had their shot last year, RC. They were 8-3. They were sitting pretty, even for the number one overall seed. They weren't making the Super Bowl. Let's not get crazy. But if they were going to buy time for Peterson and staff not to get fired bulky, last year was the year to get the number one overall seed, maybe get a playoff win, which actually they did last year. They did get a playoff win.
That Chargers win.
Yeah.
That was their window, or that was a moment. But now the rest of the division is exponentially better because they all have better quarterbacks. And you would think that Trevor Lawrence, you got Florida, you got Trevor Lawrence. You would think that that would be a magnet to NFL people to go sign there, but look at who they got. I mean, they got Darnell Savage, Gabriel Davis, Eric Armstead. They had to overpay them to go there. To me, they're not better. They're spinning their wheels, and while the other top teams are hit the accelerator and have gone way past them. Oh, and the whole thing about why nobody. You would think that they would want to go to Florida and be with Trevor Lawrence because that's all they're told. I wonder if the league is also kind of like with Bryce Young, because they didn't really attract anybody great to go there either. I wonder if the league knows, even though they won't say it out loud, that Trevor Lawrence isn't the guy that that the media says that he is. Because you would think that this would be a perfect situation for everybody to flock to. And obviously they had money to throw around at players, but they did not get any of the top tier guys. I think they burned a bunch of money on things that aren't really going to help them. And their window is closed as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, going from a popular MVP pick last year, Trevor Lawrence now seemingly in the outside looking in, even within his own division, which is kind of crazy to think about. But
the entirety of football scouting was wrong about Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields from that draft. Why wouldn't we think that they were also wrong about Trevor Lawrence in that where they said he was an A+++, he's a C. So that's almost as damning as having Justin Fields as a B or a Mac Jones as a B and then finding out he's an F. I mean, it does damage. At least the teams that have, Mac Jones and Justin Fields and Zach Wilson, they failed fast and moved on. Jacksonville's going to stick themselves with a C quarterback with the next Carson Wentz for the next several years. And they're going to eventually the media is going to turn on them and maybe question that they overrate Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
But it ain't yet.
Let's go to the second place team in this division, the Indianapolis Colts, who are one win away from making the playoffs last year in that crazy Week 18 game when Stroud went into Indianapolis and just really broke the hearts of all Colts fans. But the Colts fans should be happy that a team led by Gardner and Minshew is able to compete with the Texans. So when Anthony Richardson comes back healthy this year, maybe that they're going to have a better shot. So their biggest offseason move, RC, was being able to retain Pittman, being able to get Kenny Moore back in. They got Raekwon Davis from the Dolphins. So nothing too crazy. They got Flacco as a backup quarterback too to step in if Richardson can't go. But definitely they're
very similar quarterbacks, so you can just really plug them in for each other, plug in the same offense because they're so similar to each other in style of play. What are NFL teams thinking? But go ahead.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess Fields would have been a good
that would have been the perfect situation. They should have traded him, and then if they had already had Flacco ahead of that, they're like, well, sorry, Joe, we'll move you to a place that you fit better. We couldn't pass up on getting Justin Fields for nothing. Just to keep an offensive continuity. But
they didn't shoot themselves. I don't think they shot themselves in the foot in this free agency, though. Unlike the other teams, I feel like they're just where they were last year, but they're going to be better if AR is healthy and being able to compete. So, I mean, that's outside of our free agency equation right now, but just their trajectory for 2024, they should be bad. I mean, AR was electric in those 5 games. Had that guy played a full season or even finished the games he played in, he could have easily pushed Stroud for that offensive rookie of the year.
The Colts had that game won against Houston late in the season for the division title, for the playoff spot. They had a 4th and 1 play, if you remember it, 4th and 1 in goal to go, or not goal to go, 4th and 1 within the red zone. And instead of taking a field goal to, I think, tie it, they went for the 4th and 1 and had a good play call. But for some reason, they took Jonathan Taylor out of the game. And maybe Zach Moss was hurt. I can't remember what was going on. But they put Tyler Goodson in for the only time I think he played a snap in that game was to come in for that 4th and 1, and he flared out of the backfield, and he was wide open. All he had to do was catch the ball, and he would have had a first down, and then the Colts would have probably gone on and won that game for sure, and he dropped it. So they were that close to the media not having as much of a enthusiasm over C.J. Stroud and the Texans, because it would have been the Colts, and then everybody would have said, man, and then when they get Anthony Richardson back. But I believe it is they're going to get, in theory, they will get Anthony Richardson back for a full season, which is going to be great. Is way better than Gardner Minshew, and I like Gardner Minshew as my backup quarterback. I don't want him as my starter. I don't. If your lead punch, if your main plan is to have Gardner Minshew start, you're likely not going to advance very far if you can even win the division. Just so happens he almost pulled it off last year in that weakened division with the Texans. Probably that'll be the worst Texans team we'll see for the next decade. But they get instantly better by Anthony Richardson being there. They're going to get better by Jonathan Taylor. Remember, missed the first, 4 games, 6 games?
Mm-hmm.
And then when he came back, it was a slow comeback. So you got a full season of Jonathan Taylor, full season of Anthony Richardson, in theory. They already had a halfway decent offensive line. Defense played well. They're just a piece or two away that they're going to need to compete with Houston. So they didn't blow me away with what they did in free agency, but I'm kind of blown away by the fact that they didn't get suckered into some of the guys that they let go. They didn't get into a Gardner Minshew bidding war. They let Tycon Lewis go. They didn't put money into Zach Moss, put money into a running back. So they let the right guys go. They re-signed their guys. They re-signed the right guys for them. So I think they're doing the smart thing. But I'm making my 5-cent prediction. They're going to be the ones that trade with the Cardinals and get the number 4 to take Marvin Harrison, because the owner is a deranged.
Keep the family legacy there, right? Marvin Harrison, obviously, yeah. Colts legend. I could see that, but RC, that number 4 pick is going to have a huge premium associated with it, because a lot of people are penciling in the Vikings to trade up for a QB. Anytime a QB is involved in discussion for that pick, all of a sudden the price skyrockets.
Jim Irsay is going to sit down with a cold beverage, possibly some other items, and he's going to tell Chris Ballard, I don't care what you have to trade, get me into Marvin Harrison.
Or
they don't know if that's a 3 or I don't know that it'll be that far, but he'll give them the edict that this is what we're doing. They just don't know. I would suspect they just don't know if they need to get the 3 or 4 to do such a thing. And I assume it's 4, but they may wait until they see that the actual first 3 picks are quarterbacks, and Arizona's sitting out there with their pick, and maybe it's a draft day event. So that's just an aside. Just what I think Indianapolis is going to try to do is get to number 4 to take Harrison.
I will be so disappointed in them if they did something like that in a draft class full of receivers. I mean, you have guys that are going to go in the 5th and 6th round that normally would go in the 2nd or 3rd. Like, even at their own pick, RC, at 15, you can probably get Brian Thomas, who easily could be the best receiver in this class. So the fact that
this will be a Jim Irsay special.
Oh man, I don't even want. It grinds my like. I'm just getting frustrated thinking about it. So let's move on to hopefully a more sane organization. Sane in the sense that they made the pick. They got C.J. Stroud last year, and they also got Will Anderson, who, they had to give up their first round pick this year for him to move up in the draft last year. But they ended up with, arguably the best defensive player last year. The best RC disagrees, but we'll continue, and he'll give his thoughts on that while I tee this up for him. They definitely got the best offensive player in the draft last year. And then in this free agency, they got Danielle Hunter, 2 years, close to $50 million. He's a Houston native, wanted to go back home. He was actually offered more money by Atlanta, 3 years, $75 million, but decided to stay, wanted to go home, no state income tax in Texas. They also, from their division rivals, from the Titans, they got Azeez Al-Shaair. But more importantly, RC, the moves that I really liked for them were that they got Jeff Okudah from the Falcons. They also got CJ Henderson from the Panthers. So they're adding pieces into their secondary. And their departures, their key departures, they lost Blake Cashman, I believe, to the Vikings, and they also lost Grenard to the Vikings as well. So they have some moving parts here, but I like the overall direction that they headed in.
For every player they lost positionally, like Grenard, then they signed Hunter. When they lost Cashman, then they signed Al-Shaair. There was just, to me, this offseason has been more spinning of wheels, staying in the same place, not addressing the offensive line, which it's kind of like the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, Stroud and Burrow make the offensive line better, but you still want to invest in that to keep them safe, because if Burrow or Stroud goes down, the whole thing is over. So I don't see them making any grand moves to bolster the offensive line. The defensive names are coming and going and winding up about in the same place. One of the best moves that they made, Okudah's handy, but getting Danico Autry from Tennessee, that guy has been a really good pass rusher that always goes cheap, and he's been one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, just by, if you count sacks as the way you're going to judge that. He's been one of the best sack guys for like the last 5 years in the NFL. Danielle Hunter, if you're going to put, if you're hell bent on putting a lot of money into an edge rusher, which I think is a monstrous mistake, you want to put it into Danielle Hunter. So I wouldn't have done that, but the fact that they did it, I think he's better than Grenard. So they're just going to be good because of C.J. Stroud, but I don't see them pulling away in free agency with what they've done. They've not hurt themselves. They may have helped themselves, but it's not like, wow, Houston really put a stamp on this offseason and really pushing themselves away from the Colts. I don't think they're that far away from the Colts.
How did you like their trade for Mixon, getting that? Do you see it as a big upgrade compared to Singletary last year?
They could have signed Dante Foreman and then drafted a running back. They could have waited and got a running back in August that got cut. Running back, to me, I mean, there's only a couple running backs that really make a difference, and Mixon is not one of them, nor is Singletary. So to me, those are just bodies.
And if we look at the South as a division, would you say that they're the winners thus far in free agency, or would you give the nod to another team?
I don't love what any of these teams did. If we're just looking at what they did in and of the moves, I guess Houston's, all their moves made them a little bit better. I mean, they got Hunter as an upgrade, adding Autry. Autry, if you're wanting to get after the quarterback, having Will Anderson, Daniil Hunter, and Danico Autry is massive. And no, Will Anderson was not the best defensive rookie. He was voted that way, but Kobe Turner from the Rams was the better rookie. And Christian Gonzalez, if he'd have played the whole season, would have been the best rookie defender. So, I mean, I guess I would give the nod to Houston, but nobody here had. It's like when we did the NFC, we're like, man, look at what the Falcons are doing. This is so smart. Not just the Cousins thing, which is obvious that that you almost win free agency just by getting Kirk Cousins if you're the Falcons. But I'm like, look at what the Rams are doing, man. They are just assassins, getting Darius Williams and plucking those offensive linemen and re-signing their own offensive linemen. Look at what Detroit's doing, man. They had a problem in the secondary, and they go out and they trade for Carlton Davis, and then they signed. His name is escaping me now.
CJDJ, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson.
No, there's another cornerback that was pretty slow. Amik Robertson from Las Vegas.
Oh yeah.
It's like they're doing the little things to get better. That got me excited about. They were already good teams. Like Houston's there, ready to take that next step. What they've done is, to me, is not as impressive of what Atlanta, Detroit, and the Rams have done. But I will give the nod to Houston just because they did get some serious firepower on the front line for pass rush, and I assume that's what D'Amico Ryans is trying to do, is have a high pressure front. So I don't agree with that. I don't think you should put your money there, but they only really spent big money on Hunter, and it's only for 2 years. So
yeah, they're still on Stroud's rookie deal, so they could take the hit from that. So okay, Houston advances in that division. Let's move to the AFC North, which had all 4 teams, I believe, with a winning record. First time since 1938 since that happened. Cincinnati finished last. Obviously, Burrow had his season-ending injury there. High hopes for him, and if there was any year that the not only the AFC being wide open, but it just felt like any team could have literally won the Super Bowl this year. This could have been a year where Joe Burrow, got his ring. But let's review the moves that Cincinnati made. They lost Awuzie to the Titans. They lost Reeder to Detroit, their defensive tackle. But they got Sheldon Rankins from Houston, which I'm not really too sure how good of a move.
That's a downgrade from Reeder.
That's what I would have assumed. And they re-signed Von Bell, their safety that they lost a couple years ago to free agency to Carolina. They got Zach Moss. They lost Joe Mixon. So not really seeing too much here that I like. For fantasy football purposes, I like that they signed Mike Gesicki. I think he could probably be like a good tight end for fantasy football. But, I mean, just for them advancing, I wanted to see more investment in the offensive line, and I'm not seeing it here.
I feel like we have been touting the Bengals as the best team in the NFL for 2.5 seasons. Probably partway through that run where Cincinnati went to the Super Bowl, we all thought they were the best team. Then we thought they were going to be the best team the following year, and they got clipped by Kansas City in the AFC title game when they had all those offensive line injuries.
That was the year before.
And then the Burrow injury last year. So for 3 seasons, you and I and Bet the Close Chris have been studying and observing and watching everything happening in the NFL, and we're all coming to the same conclusion that the Bengals were one of the best teams and better than the Chiefs. And then the Bengals would go out and beat the Chiefs every time that they played them until they lost last second to them in the AFC Championship 2 years ago when they had 3 offensive linemen that were down like from the week before. Like, it's just they're always making, or they're always having a bout of bad luck, whether it's a Cooper Kupp phantom pass interference call to get the Rams the Super Bowl, whether it's all their offensive linemen get hurt when they finally got them all back going into the AFC title game 2 years ago, and then Burrow's calf. It's like something always goes wrong, but we're always come right back and go, this is the best team. This is the best team. This is the first time in 2.5 seasons where I don't think the Bengals are the best team anymore. I think their window, they may have missed their window of opportunity, and it's going to take some slick moves to get them back on track, but they didn't make any slick moves. They actually paid Sheldon Rankins more than DJ Reader. So
that's unreal.
I'm shocked that they did that.
How could they think that's a good idea?
I mean, I know that they've got the medicals, so they may have been, afraid of the DJ Reader injury, but he was so important to them that I would rather have him and just let him rehab, and if he misses a couple games to start the season, no problem. I mean, you could have there's a million Sheldon Rankins out there to get. So they downgraded at defensive tackle. They downgraded running back by bringing in Zach Wallace. I mean, that's not going to be a big. I shouldn't say that's a downgrade. It's just a sideways move. They didn't get any better or any worse. Adding Von Bell at safety doesn't make them better. Mike Gesicki, I hate to break it to you, he sucks. He's going to have no impact. Tanner Hudson will be their starting tight end of note, but it won't be that much of note because they really don't wear out the tight ends that much for fantasy football. This team just feels like it's losing its grip. Loses Jonah Williams, loses Awuzie, who had a bad year last year coming off an injury, but the year prior he was awesome. They've got depth in the secondary, so they can overcome it. This is still going to be a good team, but they didn't. With all the other, with now Houston all of a sudden has got the new great thing at quarterback, so Joe Burrow's starting to get forgotten. With Anthony Richardson possibly being in that realm, Kansas City just continues to find a way. All of a sudden, Cincinnati seems to be melting into the background like Buffalo. It's like, you're good. You're really good. You're never going to win a Super Bowl, are you? You're going to find a way to not win that Super Bowl. So I'm disappointed. I would love to have seen like an off season where like, whoa, look at the Bengals are restocking. The Bengals did this and the Bengals did that. And do squat.
The Bengals should be the lesson to why you should invest in your offensive line. 2 of the 4 seasons that Burrow started ended in season-ending injuries. So if you're going to take anything from these podcasts we're doing, the offensive line, especially when you have your QB of the future, you got to protect your asset, man. It's that simple.
But Jamar Chase is super cool. So they passed up on who's the offensive lineman that went to the
Chargers? Sewell.
Yeah, they could have had him starting for the next decade.
Yeah.
You can get wide receivers all over the place. So
we went crazy over that. I remember that, RC, back in 20. Chase is great, but we were going crazy that they wouldn't take Sewell.
So the Bengals are focused on making Joe Burrow happy. So he gets Jamar Chase. They'll sign Clyde Edwards-Helaire before long. I'm sure they'll try to make a trade for Justin Jefferson. They can go have all the fun that they want trying to put the LSU team back together again, but they are losing ground. They're still viable. Would shock me if somebody from the future came and said, hey, just letting you know, the Bengals won the Super Bowl for the 2024 season. I wouldn't be stunned. I'm just not as enthusiastic about it as I've been putting money on them. I've lost plenty of money on the Bengals to get to and win the Super Bowl in this time of year when you could start betting on it, betting in advance to take advantage of the good odds on the Bengals. I've been the fool because it has not worked out. and I don't see this team any better. It's not terrible, but I don't see them getting any better.
The issues are there. I mean, as long as Joe Burrow's there, they have a boxer's chance in any single game. But will he hold up all 18 weeks? I doubt it with that offensive line in that division in the cold.
Let me throw this at you. Tell me how you would answer this question. If I assured you from the future, like, hey, want to know something about the 2024 season? Joe Burrow does not miss a snap all season into the playoffs, whatever that means. Where do you think the Bengals would wind up at if you knew that Burrow made it through the whole season?
I can't even say that they'll win their division safely because their division's so freaking good. And if he takes every snap, that doesn't tell me he's not injured. He took snaps when his calf was bothering him too, so he's probably nicked up.
All right, let me just say he played all of his games. He played every snap, and he was never on an injury report the entire season.
So he got away scot-free. I'd like their chances. I still don't think they're like, I wouldn't say they safely won the division. They have feel better about it, but I think that there are other teams here that could take that. I mean, they finished last, so it's not really saying much, right? By saying they're not going to win the division. I don't know.
I want to bring back. There's one team in the NFL that head-to-head has the Chiefs' number, and it's the Cincinnati Bengals. You let the Bengals get into this playoffs and have to go through Kansas City, they're going. Now, I don't know that they have the same relationship in reverse with Baltimore, but I'm still high on the Bengals, just not as swagger confident. I've often called them the 3-time defending Super Bowl champs of the last 3 seasons that never were because of the injuries and other weird factors. But I'm not prepared to say that this season, which means this
got a puncher's chance, RC. Always.
I am not going to bet on the Bengals. I don't think I'm going to bet on the Bengals this year. So guaranteed they'll win the Super Bowl.
Kind of like how you are always on the other side of the Baltimore bets.
Don't even get me started on the Ravens.
I'm going to back them.
I'm going to back them to bring them down.
Oh, boy. Well, let's get into the third place division, the third place team in the AFC North, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have made headlines this offseason by literally changing up their QB room from A to Z. Pickett gone, Rudolph gone. They bring in Russell Wilson, paying him absolutely nothing. They trade for Justin Fields, pennies on the dollar there, and the second season in a row where Omar Khan got the better of Ryan Poles in a deal. The year before, he traded the 32nd overall pick for Trace Claypool. That 32nd overall pick was then used to get Joey Porter. So, I mean, Khan's making some moves here. I don't know how much I love where I don't know how much I really like where they're going to finish at the end of the day. I do think that they're going to be better this year. They got Patrick Queen from the Ravens, so I like what he does.
Terrible.
Okay, there we go. RC debunking another thing that I liked. But other than that, I mean, they traded away Deontay Johnson to the Panthers. So now you have Russell Wilson with maybe George Pickens. You have Arthur Smith at OC, which is a little disgusting. He's going to run the ball like crazy, I'll tell you that much. But other than that,
with one of the worst running backs in the NFL, that's a starter. He's going to run. And with an offensive line that's half of what it was in Atlanta. Let me just go through Patrick Queen. Let me just say, if there's a franchise in the NFL that has scouted the linebacker position worse than the Steelers in the last 5 years, name them. You can't, because their Devin Bush and Miles Jack and everything that they've tried to do at middle linebacker has been a total disaster. Then they give up on Robert Spillane, and then he goes to Las Vegas and becomes the centerpiece of their defense. The Steelers don't know jack squat about linebackers, and then they go out and they give a bunch of money to Patrick Queen. That should tell you how good Patrick Queen's going to be. This is a bad offseason. I don't think the quarterbacks are an upgrade, and anything that could come from the quarterbacks is going to be negated by Arthur Smith. That adding Arthur Smith as offensive coordinator sealed the Steelers' fate. Somehow they'll get to 9-8. I don't know how, but surely they will. And the Steelers always make the playoffs because either the Bengals have lost Burrow or the Ravens have lost Lamar Jackson, and somehow they flop into the playoffs to get obliterated. I'm praying that they finally get their comeuppance. And this group that they have signed garbage. They have done nothing in this offseason but create problems for themselves. I don't know how this team, if all the teams are healthy, relatively healthy, especially at quarterback, the Steelers don't stand a chance. The Steelers only get ahead when there's quarterback chaos in the rest of the division. Burrow's hurt. Lamar Jackson, before this past season, Lamar Jackson was hurt the last 2 seasons coming down the stretch. So the Steelers were getting over on Brett Huntley. The Browns went got Baker Mayfield get hurt, and then Deshaun Watson couldn't play for 12 weeks, and then Deshaun Watson is terrible, and he got hurt last year. It's like the Steelers live to get over on the rest of their division getting hurt at quarterback. So if that happens again, then the Steelers will get a number 7 seed and get crushed by whoever.
I want
but
nothing
if all those
to do with Arthur Smith.
If the quarterbacks in the division stay healthy, Steelers are going to finish 4th in the division.
Yeah, and I mean, Justin Fields apparently wanted to go to Pittsburgh, maybe thinking that he has an opportunity to start there. Because the moment, I mean, everyone's praising Pittsburgh right now for that Russell Wilson signing, but the moment the guy has a bad game, and keep in mind, now you're in a division with really tough defenses where you're playing outdoors in crappy weather. Wilson's not in an ideal position to succeed behind a average offensive line. I mean, you have George Pickens at least, who could end up being good, but I mean, Wilson's deep ball isn't there. Like, he's not as accurate as he once was. He's not making plays on the ground. Like,
I watched Arthur Smith destroy Kyle Pitts and Drake London. What do you think he's going to do to George Pickens?
Pickens is going to want out probably mid-season. He should be ready.
If I were him, I would scrub the team from my Instagram. I would demand a trade, and he would get it if he did.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's move on to an even worse offensive coordinator situation. Actually, comparable. I shouldn't say worse.
No, you can't do worse than Arthur Smith. Yeah, you can. There's a team we'll talk about coming up, but
Cleveland Browns RC.
That's right. I'm sorry. They got Ken DuBois. We got some real gems in this division.
Yeah. So they finished second last year. They had a nice late season surge with Flacco. He brought David Njoku to life. Cooper had a 200-yard game against Houston. Like they had some nice little explosive games towards the end, but then in the playoffs they just got absolutely waxed by the Texans. Stood no shot. They have Jadeveon Clowney. They let him go on free agency. I don't think that's going to be a huge loss to them. They got to retain Zadarius Smith. They lost Taki to New England. And the biggest headline move that they probably made is that they gave up a couple picks to get Jerry Jeudy. And now the whole mainstream media is going crazy because you got Cooper, Jeudy, and I believe, is it Elijah Moore? Yeah. So I mean, and on top of it, not only did they trade for Judy, they handed him a contract too, which I found that to be so bizarre, especially with them in their cap situation as it is, paying Deshaun Watson all this money. I didn't get it. They even have 4 quarterbacks, RC, on the roster. That part, the fact that they have 4 quarterbacks makes me wonder what's going on with Watson, right? Like, why would they go and get Huntley from the Ravens? Why? And they have 2 other ones that they signed as well. Like that part just doesn't make sense to me.
Nothing that Cleveland has done this offseason makes any sense. And it's they have a good foundation of a team that it has the problem it always has. No one is going to sign there in free agency unless you radically overpay them. So, and then they got to trade for guys like Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper. They got to trade because then those players can't leave. They possess them. Then they're going to overpay them to stay there, like they just did with Jerry Jeudy. This team, I think the window for this team is also closing. If Nick Chubb was healthy with that offensive line and a decent defense, they could be gritty, but Deshaun Watson is going to be the death of them on top of Jerry Jeudy. But I mean, that's a side show piece of it. The problem is Deshaun Watson. So they're sitting on their version of the Denver Russell Wilson problem. They're sitting on their own quarterback problem, who's one of the bottom quarterbacks in the league now. They pay him like he's the best quarterback in the league. When he comes, probably the worst thing that could happen to the Browns is that Deshaun Watson actually gets healthy and plays. They'd be much better off if they would have had if they had healthy Nick Chubb and just went with Jacoby Brissett with this offensive line and their defense, they could out Pittsburgh. But they don't have any of those things. Getting Jameson Winston is just another sign of how ridiculous their front office is. Adding Tyler Huntley when you already got Dorian Thompson-Robinson doesn't make any sense. Deshaun Watson just doesn't make any sense, period. This team is stuck at about 500 or less, just like the Steelers. They need injuries to everybody else to get over. I don't like what they've done at all.
And they added one of your favorite offensive coordinators, Ken Dorsey, and that situation's probably going to end badly.
Ken Dorsey was so bad for a year and a half. I don't know how anybody could go, oh, this is our guy. Just like Arthur Smith, like how bad could he be? Could he show you on national television and on game tape all over the place, and you could see the statistics that make you would want to hire him, and yet someone did. So they're going to get what they deserve. The Steelers and the Browns are the worst 2 teams in this division, but they'll both probably make the playoffs because the other team's quarterbacks will get hurt and propel them, just like has happened the past couple of years.
RC, I'm looking at Spot Track right now, and they have no out with the Watson contract. They just
everything's guaranteed.
Yeah, crazy. So they're stuck with him not only this season, in 2025 and 2026. They are really in a pickle right now. That I feel bad for Browns fans.
And they've lost all their draft picks to try to address it anyway because they traded him for Deshaun Watson. So they've self-inflicted wounded themselves right out of being taken seriously. They're a decent team, but they aren't gonna advance through the playoffs.
And
if they find a way to get there.
They could have had Baker at a deal, man, and instead they gave away all those first round picks, all that money away to Deshaun Watson, and they're gonna have to suffer for it. But RC, let's move to the first place team in the division, the AFC runner-ups, Baltimore Ravens. They were considered the favorites. A lot of people thought that they were going to be the ones to not only make it to the Super Bowl, but win it. I think at one point, they were 5.5 4-point home favorites against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, which was wild. They lost Patrick Queen, who you don't like. They also lost Gus Edwards, but they add Derrick Henry. They lose Odell Beckham Jr., and they locked up their nice interior defensive lineman, Justin Madubuike, which is good for them. So, I mean, RC, out of every team in this division, it feels like Baltimore is the one that stayed the same / improved compared to everybody else.
Getting rid of Patrick Queen was a win, especially not having to pay him that money. They were trying to trade him 2 years ago. He's not good, and the fact that they got the Steelers to take him is like another step ahead of a team in the division is by dumping Patrick Queen on them. They want to be the ultimate run game offense. And then they got the ultimate run game running back. So by virtue of that move, it's a great offseason. You know, getting a Joe Mixon, getting a Josh Jacobs, they're a dime a dozen. You could have gotten Josh Jacobs will have the same season as A.J. Dillon would have if they would have forced A.J. Dillon to be the starter. There's running backs that are replaceable, but there's no one like Derrick Henry if you're going to have a power run game. So the fact that they got that key piece ahead of everybody else is a great offseason. They haven't lost anybody major, and they were already good to begin with. Losing the defensive coordinator may end up being the problem for them this season.
That's the same defensive coordinator, RC, that, I mean, he had his moments too. I mean, he didn't have really much of a game plan against Kelsey in that first half in Baltimore. I don't want to just say that, you know, I don't want to blame him for everything because they did lock him down in the second half. So like he did make the adjustments you want to see, but
going into that though, Kelsey was not playing. He was not much of a factor, and you can see he's slowing down. I get maybe throwing the wrinkle out there that, hey, we're not worried about Kelsey beating us. Let them try to make their throws there. It didn't work, but then as soon as they wanted to shut it down, they shut it down. What that guy did with a no-name secondary is a miracle.
Yeah, they missed Marlon Humphrey for a lot of the season.
I mean, you can't name their starting two corners when Humphrey was out. I have to stop and think, and I don't think I could name one of them. They were having a rotational group basically off the streets almost. That's a sign of a great defensive coordinator when you can pull that off. So that may be their Achilles heel. I don't know if they're going to be.
The issue I had with them, RC, not so much their DC, it's their OC getting away from the run game in that AFC Championship, which really it was sort of out of character for them. They're running a lot during the season, and the game was never really out of hand.
Well, it's going to be a lot easier to call the offense when you got Derrick Henry.
Oh, yeah. And maybe Keaton Mitchell back there. Hopefully he's healthy as a change of pace back. That combo right there, that 1-2 punch is going to be deadly.
We'll see how Zach Orr is a fast riser coach to defensive coordinator, ex-player there. So he's going to be the next D'Amico Ryans type. Bottom line, Baltimore's in a better place now than they were a year ago, and they were already the best team in this division. So,
and really, I mean, they had the conference locked up. They were the 1 seed, very close to making it to the Super Bowl. So we'll see how they do next year. But let's move on to our last division, RC, the AFC East. We'll start with the last place team in the division, and saying the Patriots finishing last in their division is a new trend, probably going to stick around for a while. They picked third overall this year. They got rid of their legendary head coach, Bill Belichick, and now they have Gerard Mayo, their former linebacker, taking the helm at head coach. Their most notable move in the offseason was locking up their own offensive lineman, Mike Anenwanu, who got a 3-year, $57 million deal. And they also brought back Jacoby Brissett. They got Antonio Gibson from the Commanders as well. And they also got KJ Osborne recently from the Vikings. But, I mean, they have a lot that needs to, there's a lot of holes to address on the offensive side of the ball, at least. They're sitting there third overall. Unless they get blown away with a crazy trade by the Vikings, I don't see them moving off that third pick.
I think they might to acquire more picks and maybe roll with Brissett this year and maybe try to fall back into the Bo Nix or Michael Penix sweepstakes in the middle of the draft, potentially.
It's going to take a lot, though. I don't think it's going to be cheap.
Outside of that, they've done nothing to this team was already bad, and then the player they signed some of their own guys that was smart enough, but the guys that they actually signed from the outside looks like to me there's nobody knows what they're doing with the guys that if you're gonna try to skim the bottom of the barrel and get some slick guys off the trash heap and polish them up and make them good players or get cute sleepers cheaper. They didn't do any of that. The names that they signed, I don't understand. Jacoby Brissett is a fine backup quarterback, but them getting KJ Osborne that's almost as bad as the Jerry Jeudy acquisition. Austin Hooper doesn't mean anything. I mean, they were bad, and they lose Trenton Brown. They were already really bad, and they're not any better. And then you're going to throw a rookie quarterback in there.
Not an ideal situation. Not an ideal situation for.
They are racing to become the worst team in the NFL. Bill Belichick destroyed them the last couple of years, and now they're paying the price for it.
But as bad as he was on the offensive side of the ball, right? Like drafting players there. At least on the defense, made some good moves with at least Christian Gonzalez getting him 16th overall last year. At least you had that. Say what you want about the guy. He knows how to scout defense, grab defenders. Offensively, he lost his touch. He was known for moving off players 1 year too early, and it bit him in the ass with Brady, who's once in a lifetime player. But RC, I think even Mac Jones, he wanted to trade Mac Jones. I read an article at the beginning of last year for a second round pick, but it was Kraft sort of forcing him to keep him around, and I think it was even Kraft that made him take him in that in 2020.
Which is all fine, but none of this would have happened had Belichick not been so smart as to think we don't need Tom Brady. So they deserve everything. Belichick deserves the ending that he had, because that was one of the worst personnel decisions in the last 5 years of the NFL. Not just sticking with Brady, giving him what he wants and surrounding him with things that he needed. Then once Brady was gone, Belichick was a disaster in free agency overall. Sure, he got Christian Gonzalez, but he also got Jack Jones, which then turned out to be a disaster. Their linebackers are awful. Obviously they earned being last place in the AFC East. And now you're going to have an inexperienced, lesser coach in a geography nobody wants to play for. This has got disaster written all over it once again.
They didn't just lose a head coach, RC. They lost everything. They lost their director of scouting. They lost their GM, XY, and now everyone's sort of shuffling. You can tell by their free agency moves. Nobody really has a handle on the pulse of where Belichick was trying to go with this roster, this, that, and the third. So they're a mess. They're going to continue being a mess. And now, welcome to the life of every other NFL team until they get a QB again. And if you're lucky enough to get a head coach to Belichick's level to what he once was, they're probably going to be at the bottom of the barrel for a long time coming.
Hopefully there's a good, great franchise quarterback in next year's draft because they're likely to have the number 1 pick.
Yeah,
but they'll probably draft a quarterback at number 3 and in a weak quarterback class and stick themselves again.
I said they probably won't, but if I'm sitting there as their GM and Robert Kraft can't fire me, we need the picks, man. We need the picks, and Minnesota's willing to pony up. Like, get 11, get 23, the pick that they traded for with the Texans, right? Go get their 2025 first-round pick and build this out slowly. If you don't like any of the quarterbacks this year, wait. Start Brissett, like you were saying.
And Penix and Nix are worthy to look at quarterbacks that you can trade out of 3, trade into the middle of the draft and pick up other assets, and then draft one of those 2 guys and be in the same boat that you would be in if you were having to pick between May and McCarthy, who I think are very much under Nix and Penix. So I just don't see anybody in New England doing anything smart at all. So I'm not holding out any hope for something genius to happen.
Belichick's probably like, finally, I got the 3rd overall, but I've never picked this high. He would have probably done something here, maybe traded back, or who knows. But anyways, enough Patriots talk. Let's move on to the Jets. RC, they had an eventful offseason. They got 2 new tackles, Morgan Moses, Tyron Smith. They already had Elijah Vera Tucker on that line. So, I mean, now their line was completely trash. So they definitely made improvements there. They signed Mike Williams, who, if he's healthy, could be a good deep threat, but I have my doubts about how successful he's going to be with the Jets. Now, the fact that they rolled into last year with that offensive line and a 41-year-old quarterback, that's almost like scouting or GM malpractice right there. So they're going to be better than what they were last year. But RC, Aaron Rodgers is already on the back leg of his career. He didn't really have that great of a season in his last season with Green Bay. Now he's coming off an Achilles. How much better could he really make this team?
Plus, you have the single worst offensive coordinator in all of football, tied with Arthur Smith, in Nathaniel Hackett. So, and I think Robert Salah, I think we'll look back this time next year and people will be talking about how bad a head coach Robert Salah was and how Nathaniel Hackett brought him down and how Aaron Rodgers brought him down. If we think of the Tyron Smith signing as, hey, what a great pick. We think of him from like 3 and 4 and 5 years ago. He may not have much gas left in the tank, and that's why Dallas just let him go. He wasn't extraordinarily expensive. Dallas could have kept him for the money that he signed for with the Jets. Dallas, I think, knows something, and this Tyron Smith thing may not work out. And if I told you that it didn't, like let's say Tyron Smith just gets hurt before the season or retires or whatever, then you look at what they did in free agency, and it's a disaster. There's nothing that happened here. I mean, John Simpson's an okay guard to add to the mix, but their big moves putting some money into Jordan Whitehead, or no, they let Jordan Whitehead go, or getting Tyrod Taylor as a backup quarterback, I guess, is their biggest moves. Getting Javon Kinlaw, who's been a bust for the 49ers, but Robert Salah was part of the group that brought him in. So now he's going to try to do a reclamation project with Kinlaw. It's just the guy. Mike Williams is interesting, but that's about it. And then they're going to probably trade Alan Lazard or cut him. So Williams in, Lazard out. I don't know that that's a big upgrade. There's a lot riding on Tyron Smith being the old Tyron Smith, and I don't know that he can be. And if he's not, this team's going down fast.
Here's what I don't like about the Tyron Smith signing. I think it gives them a false sense of hope that they have the tackle position addressed, and instead at 10th overall, instead of getting the second best tackle or even trading up to snag Alt from Tennessee, now they're going to think that they're good at the tackle position. And one injury to Tyron Smith, and this line is just as bad. I mean, nothing is as worse as is going to be as bad as last year, but still a really bad O-line at the end of the day. So
if they can get Aaron Rodgers through an entire season with that defense, this is a team that can scuffle for a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Maybe even win the division if things break the right way for them. But Tyron Smith has to come through for that. Aaron Rodgers has to stay healthy because he neutralizes Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett doesn't even mean anything anymore as long as Aaron Rodgers is there to call the plays and run the show. So everything is going to be about getting Aaron Rodgers through this season. So whether that's Tyron Smith comes through or they draft the dude out of Oregon State, who I think is the best offensive lineman in this draft, who could be available to them in the first round. Yeah.
Fuaga.
Yeah. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. I just know he's the best offensive lineman I've seen in my scouting so far of the top offensive linemen.
This is a deep draft, RC. Receivers and tackles. There's plenty of them to go around.
Tackles are way more important. And, well, everybody thinks it's deep. There's a lot of false messiahs in the tackle group. There's only a couple guys that are cut above. At wide receiver, there's a whole bunch. There's a whole
deeper
lot
at receiver.
to pick from.
Absolutely.
At tackle, once the hot two are gone, then you're going to be you're dropping way down in a tier to get a useful offensive lineman, but having to pay a huge price to get it. So this is a good draft to get in on two of the better offensive linemen. But if you don't get them, then you're going to be searching. You're going to be in trouble. So I'm on the fence with the Jets. It's all going to be about whether I need to know if Aaron Rodgers made it through the season healthy or not.
If he did, do you think they have a shot to win the division?
I wouldn't rule it out because their defense is so good.
Their defense is. I mean, they got horrendous quarterback play last year. So, I mean,
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, Aaron Rodgers is gonna be an improvement on that. I want to make myself clear on it, but I don't think we're getting the MVP Rodgers that can cancel out Hackett's stupid play calling and offensive schemes. I don't think we're getting that version of Aaron Rodgers. And in contrast to Kirk Cousins, who's more of a pocket quarterback, Aaron Rodgers is a pocket quarterback, but he always relied on his mobility to escape the pocket. A lot of his plays were made when he was moving out of it too. Not that he was a crazy scrambler. I think that Achilles injury, him being older, and his style of play will impact him more than someone like Kirk Cousins.
If Joe Flacco can walk in and tear it up, then I'm sure Aaron Rodgers can come back and tear it up. It just seems like those experienced veteran quarterbacks like Brady did with Tampa Bay, if they're healthy and playing, they almost get better with it. They almost understand the game more as time goes on. For me, it's all about whether Rodgers stays healthy, and Miami's not to be feared, and Buffalo is in kind of the same boat. They go as Josh Allen's going to go, and the Jets are going to go as Aaron Rodgers goes. But if Allen plays well and Rodgers plays well, the Jets have an advantage that they have the better defense. So I think there's a path for the Jets, but this offseason so far isn't warming my heart that it's about to happen. But if you told me that Tyron Smith ended up playing 17 games, then I think that the Jets had a pretty good shot to at least get to the playoffs.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to Miami RC, who they were in control of the division up until the last week, where they played the Bills. The Bills upset them on Sunday Night Football, not only take the division from them, but force the Dolphins to go on the road to Kansas City, and they get whacked by the Chiefs defense in the cold. Not enough. If you're Miami, you need that home field advantage. That's your only shot of beating the Bills, of beating the Ravens, of beating the Chiefs. They almost had it, and they let it slip right through their fingertips. So, RC, their defense not looking so hot, losing Christian Wilkins. They, they lost a couple other pieces. I think they lost Jerome Baker, too, to the Seahawks, Raekwon Davis, and they signed Jordan Poyer from Buffalo. They also, added Jonnu Smith early in free agency, Jordan Brooks from the Seahawks. Nothing really here is, I would say they took a step back and
lost Xavier Howard, who's one of the best corners in the NFL.
Has he signed yet with anybody?
And he's not signed anywhere yet. They lose Christian. I mean, they lost two heavyweight defensive players, and Andrew Van Ginkel is really good, and they lost him as well. This defense going backwards, and it was their own fault because they went all in on Vic Fangio, and apparently that dog ain't hunting no more. So good on them that they cut him out after 1 year, but now they're almost like in a rebuild mode. Tua can't hang. Tua, if all quarterbacks stay healthy for every team, Tua's not taking you to a title. So they're at a disadvantage at quarterback under normal circumstances. Their line can never stay healthy. Tyreek Hill's the way that Tyreek Hill's going, he's on a fast track to being the next Antonio Brown career end. I mean, if I see one more article about that guy having some type of problem off the field, the clock is ticking on that. The defense is a mess. Last year they were good because they were beating up on horrible teams. Then when they started playing better teams in the second half of the season, they were getting whacked by everybody. This could be the make or break year, and more of the break year that Mike McDaniel may end up getting bounced.
Yeah.
This is probably the last year that they'll have Tyreek Hill. And if they don't have Tyreek Hill, like if you tell me that Tyreek Hill was put in jail before the season started, the Dolphins are going to battle the Patriots for the bottom of the AFC East.
He's everything to them. He could have won MVP.
Everything.
He could have easily won MVP this year had he broken 2,000 receiving yards.
He makes Tua a legit quarterback, a legit good quarterback, but Tua's not a great quarterback, and as soon as he plays a tough defense like the Jets or what have you, he tends to melt down. Buffalo seems to have his number as well. So this is another team that's kind of just stuck in the middle. They need things to go their way to get over, but I just don't see it from what they've done so far. They're good. I mean, Kendall Fuller's a good signing. Jordan Brooks was smart. They're doing some interesting things. I give them credit for seeing that they needed to overhaul everything, just like Buffalo and Miami overhauled everything They're not just sitting still and
noise. But let's move on to the next team, RC, the Buffalo Bills, who captured the division title at the last second, week 18 against the Dolphins. They let Jordan Poyer go. They also, rightfully so, didn't want to re-sign Gabe Davis, Leonard Floyd out the door, but they made a pretty interesting signing with Curtis Samuel. They got Daquan Jones, re-signed AJ Epineza, and brought back Mitchell Trubisky as a backup quarterback. Josh Allen's clearly the best QB in this division. I think the best move that they made is the one that they made last year in the middle of the season when they got rid of Dorsey and let Lombardi run the show. But, that's not really anything with free agency this year. I'm curious to see what they do in the draft. They have some young pieces, but we'll see. We'll see what they do. RC, what did you think about their moves?
They always seem like they're just one step behind the Chiefs and that they can't get past the Chiefs nor the Bengals. So I always think with them, they're the division. They should be the division favorites to win it. And then if they get into the playoffs and Joe Burrow and Mahomes exist, they're not going to get past them. I don't see that they've done anything in personnel so far that takes them to a whole other level and is going to get them by Kansas City or Cincinnati or Baltimore. So to me, this is a good team that's riding on Josh Allen to stay alive. No more, no less, which has been the story the last couple of years.
Yeah. And, they made a pretty interesting move getting Dalton Kincaid last year, who he really started coming on. Obviously, they got James Cook in the backfield, but we'll see what they do with Khalil Shakir now that they have Curtis Samuel. I'm liking where their offense is going, and I think the clear winner, though, out of this division, if we look at the AFC East in free agency, I think just by sheer improvement, I would have to go with the Jets because they did what they could trying to get those two tackles there. And the rest of the division just seems like they either they stayed the same or didn't really improve all that much.
I would agree. And it's going to come down to if Tyron Smith plays most of the games, the Jets are going to win the free agency. If Tyron Smith craps out or gets hurt before it even gets going, then the Jets are not looking so good. Everything about the Jets is tied to that Tyron Smith move.
So if we start looking at the 4 division winners of free agency, let's pin them up: North versus South, East versus West. Houston wins the South, Baltimore wins the North. Between the two,
talk about free agency. You're talking about
just
the best
free
team?
agency. No, free agency. Who do you think is the winner between Houston and Baltimore?
I'd probably lean Baltimore. Because getting Derrick Henry is the prize for if you're going to have a heavy run game offense like they want to have. Derrick Henry is like the Tom Brady to get if you want to be a passing game offense. Derrick Henry is that guy for the run game. So to me, that's such an upgrade over Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. And I think Derrick Henry has got a ton left in the tank. And he may be that missing piece that takes them over the top this year. So for that move alone, and they didn't do anything bad otherwise, I'll say Baltimore over Houston.
Best offensive line he's going to be playing with in his career. Best quarterback he's going to be playing with in his career. And also, when you have a mobile quarterback, that opens up all the running lanes. They're going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson, if he's healthy, and Derrick Henry behind that offensive line, it's a big problem. KC versus the Jets. Who do you think won in free agency? This one's kind of tough. Because just by a sheer magnitude, I would want to say because it's not Casey didn't improve. They stayed the same, but they're so freaking good that I want to say the Chiefs. But if we're just talking about improvement from last year to this year, I want to say Jets. What do you think?
Yeah, just in moves alone, the Jets are. I don't know that the Chiefs are any better, but they're not any worse. The Jets are technically did the things that they needed to do to try to get better. I mean, for the Jets, everything is about the offensive line. The defense is great. Aaron Rodgers is good enough to win a Super Bowl. Breece Hall will be back for a full season. They didn't need to address that. They've got wide receivers. They've got capable tight ends. They've got a top defense. They got everything in place except for the offensive line. And then what did they do? They went out and got 2 veteran offensive linemen, and they'll get Bakhtiari before long, so it'll be 3. And then you're talking about maybe the Jets having, if all these guys could stay healthy, the Jets having the best free agency of any team in the NFL. Like if I told you that, hey, just to let you know about the 2024 season, Aaron Rodgers played every snap, 17 games, never was on an injury report, and the same for Tyron Smith and Bakhtiari, where do you think the Jets finished? You would say that they're going to be a playoff team at a minimum.
You asked me that same question with Burrow, and I'm going to answer more strongly here. If you tell me Aaron Rodgers made it 17 games, and you at least give me Smith with it too, he makes it 17 games.
Smith and Bakhtiari.
I get both. Okay. I think they win the division.
I think it's very possible that they win the division if that ends up being true.
I don't think it is going to be true, but if it is true under that conditional world, in that conditional world, yes.
I don't think
and I don't care what happens to Mike Williams, because Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are enough to work with for Rodgers.
Yeah. So by that logic, by virtue of that, the Jets are having the better offseason than the Chiefs.
The way that I like to evaluate it, RC, when I'm evaluating this is how much has their ceiling improved compared to last season, right? And by adding the offensive linemen, we don't think that they're all going to make it there, right? But there is a scenario that they do. And if they do, they're a legit threat.
Or if just one of the two does. Like if they get Bakhtiari, they're going to get Bakhtiari. There's no question about it. Might as well just count him into this discussion. If just one of Smith and Bakhtiari makes it through back to normal, it's a big upgrade for the Jets.
Yeah, and RC, remember, they're picking 10th overall. Like, what if they...
And they add one of these great offensive linemen that are available, they're going to be... I mean, imagine if I said to you, all right, how far do you want to take this with the Jets? Rodgers, Smith, Bakhtiari play every game and never are on the injury reports with anything serious. And they drafted, I just put out there, Alt for the sake of argument. And they drafted him and he played every game. How high is the ceiling for the Jets then?
Sky's the limit for them.
And then knowing the Jets, they'll end up drafting a pass rusher with the 10th pick to ruin all of that.
Oh my God, because to replace Bryce Huff, that would be the critical blow.
They don't need to, but this is what defensive coordinator, head coaches do.
Would you rather take a pass rusher there or Brock Bowers?
Oh, Brock Bowers.
I think that
because you know me, I mean, that's a loaded question because I'll never take a pass rusher in the first round of the draft. I will not pay them big contracts, and I will not take them in the first round of the draft. So
I know you don't like taking tight ends early too, but Bowers has that.
I would have taken Kyle Pitts up that high.
You would have taken him at 4th overall when the Falcons took him that year?
Yeah. I might have even taken him higher than that.
Interesting.
So it depends on who the tight end is. I don't want TJ Hawkinson in there because you can get a million TJ Hawkinsons. But if like somebody's weaponized like Pitts, somebody who's radical like Kincaid in his route running, if that's what you're looking for in a tight end. But Bowers has a superpower as well, and he can block. So I'm down with adding Bowers. That's another piece to this, that if they add Bowers, that's like adding another offensive lineman, because he's a pretty good blocker.
And now potentially,
and he's a threat in the receiving game, obviously.
Big time threat there. I mean, you're looking at Wilson, Bowers, Hall, maybe a Mike Williams, like that. That looks a lot on top of a loaded defense. If they had a half decent offensive coordinator, I might like it better, but I have a weird feeling that
they just need to have Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Aaron Rodgers won an MVP with Nathaniel Hackett as his offensive coordinator, so
I don't think we're getting that version of A-Rod. But again, the 2024 A-Rod that's coming is way better than anything that we saw last year out of the Jets. So
we would have never guessed that Joe Flacco could have done what he'd done. So that's I will take that same stance with the Jets, or with Aaron Rodgers, that it is. I'm not going to bet against it happening.
But Flacco gave you a quarter of a season and then pretty much got wiped out in the play. Whether it's his fault or not, he was a non-factor in that playoff game versus the Texans. It wasn't a Brady-like performance by him, right?
But
so
it was really
good. He came out of nowhere. He came off his couch.
He could arguably be one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
Agreed. Because you'd have to rule out. I mean, if you were wanting to win a game, do you want Caleb Williams or do you want Joe Flacco to win you one game in the year of 2024? So by virtue of that type of logic, just thinking about one game or in 2024, Joe Flacco could be one of the best 32 quarterbacks out there.
Yeah. For the right team, he's a good backup.
The fact that we can even say that is insane, that guys at their age can just. So I look at what Flacco did, and the fact that it was, you expected nothing and got something pretty good. Aaron Rodgers is way better than Joe Flacco is.
Right.
So if he's healthy, this is a dangerous team. But obviously, they got to keep him healthy and not draft an edge rusher at number 10.
Between the Jets and the Ravens, who do you think takes it?
For all the reasons we're talking about, you have to say the Jets are in the prime position.
Yeah.
To blow it or succeed. But the Ravens are, by virtue of their one move, that was probably as big as the Jets getting Tyron Smith, if Tyron Smith ends up being healthy and good.
And now, let's pin it up with our NFC winner. I couldn't recall. So I think we should probably take the Rams out of it. I know we were high on them last time. Just by losing Donald, they lose a few points in this whole free agency outlook. I think our two other teams we liked a lot were the Lions and Falcons. I can't recall which one you liked better in free agency.
I think you got to say the Falcons, just looking at moves, because Kirk Cousins rules. I mean, you almost get an automatic win with Kirk Cousins signing. Quarterback is that important.
You look at their ceiling, right? Like the Lions before free agency started, were going to be a Super Bowl contender, and like that was their baseline. They really did improve. They added a bunch of pieces, right? But the Falcons, I mean, before free agency started, they were either going to be just as bad as maybe the Patriots, but now they become, I don't want to say they're serious contenders, but they got a shot at it.
They went from probably a last place or close to it projection before Cousins, and are now the definitive favorites to win their division with Cousins. So
then the question becomes,
you almost have to give Atlanta the win for that one move, because that one move is everything.
So between the Jets, and it's so funny, you have both QBs coming off Achilles, but in this little Achilles bowl we have here, would you say that the Jets improved more, all things considered, or the Falcons? I mean, just given the nature of the QB position, you would have to think.
Oh yeah, I would have to say the Falcons. If you told me that all the offensive linemen, including Bakhtiari, all played the entire season healthy, and that let Rodgers play the entire season healthy, that would be a pretty amazing off season. But Kirk Cousins is almost a guarantee that I have no question that Kirk Cousins is going to be good plus with that team. I mean, he changes everything with that team. So I'm more confident Cousins is going to go through the season healthy and fine than I am any of the Bakhtiari or Tyron Smith.
Yep.
But if they do, if you tell me that Smith and Bakhtiari made it healthy and were good all the way, I'd say that maybe the Jets get the nod.
Well, that wraps up our AFC preview of free agency, where we literally went through every single division, ranked all the free agency moves. We'll have similar shows out during the after the draft, ranking everyone's picks and how that changes our rankings here. Jets and Falcons by far were the two biggest improvements from each conference, but then you also had Baltimore and Detroit doing some really good things. So we'll keep an eye out in how they attack the draft. RC, before we sign off, do you want to give the audience an update on things to come on FF Metrics?
Continuing to work on scouting reports of top prospects. We've made it through most of the, top prospects, top 50. Starting to look. I'm spending most of my days going through pro days and seeing what gems. We're about to switch over from weighing in on scouting wise top prospects to now I'm going to soon start delivering the players out of nowhere for the draft, or that are going to go undrafted, but there could be major talents in hiding. So I've got a little list of them ready to go to scout, but still going through some of the final throws of the last top guys, including the offensive linemen. So a lot of NFL draft work. We're about to start a series that will include AndrewDFS. That's because you're federally mandated, if you have a website, to do a March Madness takeoff thing. We're going to be doing a tournament style of who we think the best teams in the NFL are by pitting them against each other and having a committee vote on each matchup and then advancing those teams ahead. But little different wrinkle that we're going to do, besides it being a committee of our scouts and bettors where they think these teams are right now. The tournament is going to be the 32 teams I put them into a randomizer and just they randomly got put into matchups. So it's not division by division. It's not number 1 seed and 32 seed. It could be Kansas City versus San Francisco in the first round. If that's what the randomizer says it's going to be, then with all of those matchups, our experts are going to be weighing in on who they think the better team is and a little reason why. And we'll have some fun with that while we're working our way towards the NFL draft.
Yeah, and these videos are almost like bracket style too, right? Where we're going and picking out the winners of each conference and division. So that good stuff to come, because that's going to essentially lead to an FF Metrics power rating based off the committee vote. So that's going to be really cool to get that. And then we can repeat maybe see if we want to make any movements after the draft too, to see who.
Yeah,
really
we will for sure. And we're doing it a little bit for fun, but also just trying to get a line on who are we watching to see if they make that one more move in the draft, because there's only going to be so many players that are going to have a real 2024 impact from the draft. So who are the teams I want to see from all of our angles, between our scouts, between our bettors, between the guys that look at data, between the guys that look at tape? Who do our experts see as the better teams in the NFL? And we're going to get there by going head-to-head tournament style, team by team, to just try to get a feel for who are the teams going into the draft that we're maybe looking on betting on early, getting in early on. So,
RC,
it's
before
for
we
fun
wrap
and
up,
profit.
I want to throw a draft question out for you. This is unprompted. I didn't give you a heads up that I was going to ask you this, but if you have it top of mind, who would you say is your favorite first round prospect? So I'm talking about a player that has a first round projection in the upcoming NFL draft. You don't have to give me a sleeper from rounds 2 through 6, just a player that people would know about, that are sort of mainstream, but that's your favorite guy that's projected to go in the first round.
All right, I'm going to look at the top 32 names in the consensus of mock drafts and website rankings that we keep track of.
And not potential landing spots. Give me your raw. This is the player I'm most excited about in this draft.
Who I would take, essentially.
Say you had 1 overall, you had no holes, you're going BPA. Who's your guy?
I would take the offensive tackle from Oregon State.
Wow. Okay, that's a big compliment to him. So you're really high on that guy over Joe Alt.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. There you heard it here, folks. That's a pretty interesting take there. I wouldn't have guessed RC was going to go there, but good stuff.
I have some other, there's other guys that I like Latu from UCLA, but I'm not using a top pick on a pass rusher. I'm looking at quarterbacks, then offensive linemen, then shutdown corners. And I don't know that there's a great quarterback in this draft, and there's a lot of good corners. I don't know if there's a absolute shutdown Sauce Gardner. There probably is, but it's probably not whoever the first corner is off the board. It might be somebody that's taken in the second or third round. It's a little guessworky to pick who the best corner is from this draft, but from what I've seen so far, I don't have any doubt that the guy from Oregon State is the best offensive lineman. I may see, when I do more work on this Mims from Georgia, I'm probably going to fall in love, but he's got such a injury background that
he's huge. RC.
He's
a big guy.
mean, he's like fall in love as a scout. I could see he's going to be a fall in love with guy, but I'd rather have the guaranteed money offensive lineman than the sketchy, always hurt guy.
And now I'm going to ask you one last thing, and you're probably going to get really pissed off at me before we end this show because too many draft questions. But this guy's been making his rounds in the media, maybe because it was USC's pro day. But the son of NFL legend Jerry Rice, Brenden Rice, is also entering the NFL draft. He was a USC wide receiver. Caleb Williams is going to be throwing to him on his pro day. RC, we know this wide receiver class is deep. Is this one of the guys that you're excited about?
No.
Okay, we can.
But I'm not. I don't dislike him, but you said excited. I'm not excited about him. I will say this. I would not be shocked if the San Francisco 49ers leave this draft with both Luke McCaffrey and Brenden Rice.
Oh my God, that would be insane, man. You get Christian's brother, and then you get the son of the former legend. And it's funny, in his interviews, RC, he was saying that's what he didn't want to happen. He doesn't want to go to 49ers because he wants to start his own legacy.
Which I can see that.
Yeah. Because
and the 49ers may honor that. I didn't know that he had said that. So I'll take that
Yeah.
back. I think Luke McCaffrey. I'm looking to bet if it comes up that Luke McCaffrey is going to be a 49 because he's really good. Brennan Rice would be more of a legacy, like what the Steelers do with Connor Hayward or whatever when they pick Joey Porter Jr. So I'm not just pulling this out of my butt for, grins that, oh, wouldn't it be cool if this team drafted? This is what they do. And if I'm the 49ers, I'm making McCaffrey's good, but I want to get him so that Christian McCaffrey will want to stay with me. Not that he wouldn't want to anyway, but he's not going to give me a big hassle in contract renegotiations when we're 2 years from now and he's starting to wear down. That I'm going to be able to work with Christian McCaffrey because we've got his brother on the team. And vice versa. So, and keep a legacy going from there. Plus, these guys know, Mike Tomlin drafted Kenny Pickett because the Pitt Panthers work in the same facility, a practice facility, as the Steelers. So he knows Kenny Pickett. He knows Joey Porter's son. He knows Ironhead Hayward's son. Guys get drafted because people know them, just like Harbaugh will probably draft a couple of his Michigan players. You're more comfortable. You got more data on people. It makes total sense. That's why I think McCaffrey's going to go and want to go to San Francisco.
You know who Harbaugh missed out on one of his own guys back in 2010, 5th round, Richard Sherman. Seahawks took him, sitting on the board for the 49ers, and Harbaugh didn't take him. Matt, if the Seahawks didn't have Richard Sherman, I wonder how differently that would have ended for them. Maybe they don't win that Super Bowl against the Broncos, and maybe the 49ers overcome the Ravens in that Super Bowl with Sherman. So We'll see what Harbaugh does. I think that's enough draft questions for RC. He's probably going to get a little upset at me for giving you guys
save
too
it for
much
the next show.
Yeah, exactly. But thank you all for listening. Seriously, we really appreciate it. Check out RC's site, ffmetrics.com. And we'll be back to you guys next week or the week after with another podcast. And have a great night.